Have you ever felt invisible to your own family? In this gripping family drama, Hannah, a hardworking interior designer, secretly funds her parents' lavish lifestyle, only to discover they've excluded her from their luxurious vacations. When Hannah finally confronts them, she uncovers shocking family secrets, hidden betrayals, and the painful truth behind years of favoritism toward her sister. But when karma strikes and her sister's perfect life crumbles, Hannah faces the ultimate test. Can she forgive and rebuild her family, or will past wounds destroy everything forever? Watch until the end to discover how one brave choice can lead to freedom, healing, and true self-growth. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The day I realized I had become a stranger to my own family was the same day I found out through Instagram. I was sitting alone in my quiet studio apartment in Brooklyn, scrolling mindlessly through social media, half-focused and sipping lukewarm coffee. My thumb paused abruptly on Charlotte's recent post, my younger sister, radiant and carefree as ever, posing on a luxury yacht off the shores of Miami. Her perfectly manicured hands wrapped around our father's shoulder, our mother's cheerful laughter caught mid-frame as if frozen in a perfect commercial for family vacations. They all smiled, faces turned toward the sun, living a reality I had unknowingly funded. I zoomed in, felt the familiar tightness in my chest as I traced their joyful faces, trying to suppress the sting of exclusion. My eyes lingered on the empty space beside Charlotte where, logically, I might have stood. But no, there was only polished mahogany decking, reflecting sun rays I would never feel. Setting the phone down gently, I breathed deeply. I had spent most of my adulthood rationalizing, excusing, pretending that my efforts were valued and noticed by my family. But right now, sitting in the dimming twilight of my apartment, something was shifting inside of me. It was like an awakening, a cold clarity spreading slowly but irreversibly. I glanced over at the modest but cozy room I'd built myself. A plush velvet armchair in dusty teal, vintage wooden shelves filled with art and design books I'd collected meticulously over years of working in interior design. Each piece carefully curated, chosen for the warmth and comfort they could provide, yet now they felt strangely hollow, like props in a life I'd only pretended to live. As I sat in silence, my phone buzzed against the wood of the coffee table, breaking my fragile moment of clarity. I glanced at the screen and saw my mother's name. A chill ran through me, familiar dread blending seamlessly into weary resignation. "Hi, sweetheart. Hope you're well. Dad needs more medication. Could you send an extra $300? Things are tight again. Love you." I stared blankly at the text, fingers trembling slightly. The words felt wrong, twisted, an insult cloaked in false tenderness. My father had suffered a mild stroke just over a year ago, prompting my decision to send them $1,000 every week to cover their expenses and medical bills. It had stretched me thin, but I'd always found a way, skipping dinners out, delaying personal purchases, working overtime. Yet now, looking at their glamorous trip, something in me snapped. Enough. I stood abruptly, the cold cup of coffee forgotten as it fell to the floor, shattering ceramic and splashing dark liquid across the polished oak. The mess felt symbolic, a perfect representation of my shattered illusions. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I had always known deep down. I was invisible, a source of financial convenience rather than love. Charlotte, with her flawless life funded by marriage rather than labor, was celebrated, cherished, admired. She had done it right, according to our parents. She married wealthy and knew how to live. My life, with its independence and quiet dignity, never stood a chance. I picked up my car keys, heart thumping in my chest with a newfound sense of urgency. The need to confront them directly consumed me, overwhelming any lingering fear of disappointment or rejection. As I locked the apartment door behind me, stepping out into the cool evening air of Brooklyn, I made a silent vow to myself. Tonight, they would finally see me. They would finally see Hannah. And I knew, deep in my soul, that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same again. I drove through Brooklyn's evening traffic as the city lights blurred outside my car window, merging with reflections of my own tired eyes. A strange, raw calm enveloped me, a paradox of clarity and pain. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I approached the familiar streets of my childhood home, feeling each heartbeat echo louder in my chest. Pulling into the cracked driveway of my parents' house, I paused briefly. Under the pale glow of the porch light, everything looked deceptively unchanged. The same brick facade, the same overgrown lilacs pressing insistently against the faded paint of the shutters. It was as though the very structure itself mocked the turmoil within me, holding stubbornly onto the illusion of stability I once believed defined our family. The house key shook slightly in my hand, an unfamiliar hesitation creeping into my veins. It had been months since I'd visited in person, maintaining contact mostly through financial transfers and polite, distant texts. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped inside, instantly struck by an unsettling sense of displacement. Everything looked misplaced. Disordered, expensive suitcases still unpacked, scattered designer clothing casually draped over furniture like evidence at a crime scene. I walked slowly across the hardwood floor toward the living room, my footsteps muted by the plush rug my mother had always insisted was essential for comfort. My eyes settled on a photo wall that dominated one corner of the living room. Charlotte's smiling face looked back at me, repeated in countless pictures. Her perfect, carefree existence immortalized in frames of gleaming silver and gold. I scanned the images: Charlotte at her wedding, Charlotte and her husband at an exotic resort, Charlotte shopping with my parents in Paris. Not a single photo included me. It hit me with painful clarity. I had funded this lavish lifestyle, yet my presence was erased, replaced by glossy memories of Charlotte's effortless privilege. "Is that you, Charlotte?" My mother's voice called from upstairs, floating down the staircase, warm and expectant. My heart clenched at her hopeful tone. Hopeful because she anticipated Charlotte, not me. "No, Mom. It's Hannah." A brief silence hung in the air, uncomfortable and heavy, before she appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in an elegant silk robe that I recognized instantly, one of Charlotte's extravagant gifts from Europe. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, betraying a flash of annoyance before quickly shifting into a practiced warmth. "Oh, Hannah, honey, I wasn't expecting you tonight," she said, descending slowly, each step deliberate and guarded. "Is everything all right?" I watched her closely, noticing the carefully maintained expressions she wore, concern mixed with mild inconvenience. I chose my words carefully, forcing calm into my voice despite the storm inside. "I saw Charlotte's pictures from Miami," I said softly, my voice betraying the ache more than I'd intended. I was surprised to find out about the family vacation that everyone except me attended. Mom shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flickering away briefly before returning to me with defensive clarity. "We didn't tell you because we knew you'd say you were too busy. You always say you're too busy." My throat tightened. It was true. I often used work as an excuse to avoid the emotional toll these interactions inevitably took. But this time, no one had even offered me that choice. "And yet, you had no trouble texting me tonight, asking for more money. Do you realize how much it hurts to fund a life I'm never even invited to join?" Mom sighed dramatically, her eyes narrowing. "Don't be melodramatic, Hannah. Your father's medication is important." "Important enough for another luxury vacation?" My voice sharpened, more cutting than I intended. "Tell me, did Dad run out of medicine before or after the yacht trip?" Her expression hardened, shifting from discomfort to indignation. "How dare you imply we're irresponsible with your help? We've done everything for you girls." Her words struck a nerve deep within me, unlocking years of suppressed resentment and disbelief. "Everything, Mom? You call spending my hard-earned money on your vacations and designer clothes everything? Charlotte doesn't even work, yet you treat her like royalty because she married someone rich." She moved closer, eyes flashing dangerously. "Charlotte knows how to live her life, Hannah. She made good choices. Maybe if you'd married better, you wouldn't be here whining." I flinched visibly at the cruelty in her voice, the reality of her words hitting me harder than any physical blow could. Tears threatened to spill over, hot and angry, but I forced them back. "I've sacrificed everything," I whispered, my voice trembling despite myself. "Everything for you and Dad. Yet no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. Charlotte gets praised for breathing while I break myself apart to support you." For a brief moment, silence returned, thick with tension and painful truth. Mom opened her mouth as if to respond, but footsteps at the door interrupted us sharply. "Hannah?" My father's tired voice filled the room. He stood in the doorway, hunched slightly, eyes avoiding mine. "I thought I heard your voice." "Yes, Dad, I was just leaving," I replied coldly, turning away to hide the raw wound that his silence opened even further. Mom called sharply as I moved toward the exit. "If you leave now, don't come back expecting forgiveness." I paused briefly, my hand on the door handle, the weight of my decision pressing heavily on my shoulders. Turning back slowly, I faced her fully, a newfound strength radiating from the core of my being. "I don't need your forgiveness. Not anymore," I said, the words quietly firm, tasting like freedom. "You'll have to find someone else to fund your charade. I'm done." I stepped outside, the cool night air brushing tears down my cheeks as I closed the door behind me. The hollow sound echoed through the empty street, marking the end of one chapter and the painful beginning of another. Yet beneath the ache and uncertainty, I felt something else stirring, a quiet, resolute sense of liberation. For the first time, the path ahead was mine alone, free from the invisible chains of misplaced obligation. I climbed back into my car, taking one last glance at the home I'd grown up believing represented love and acceptance. Now I knew the truth. It had never truly been home, only a place where I'd silently faded into the background. Driving away, I understood something clearly for the first time. Sometimes, the most courageous act of love is the choice to love yourself first. Days blurred into a restless rhythm after that night at my parents' house. I buried myself in work sketching designs, attending endless client meetings, and rearranging showroom displays, anything to fill the silence that lingered stubbornly in my apartment. Each evening, the absence of my usual routine with family felt simultaneously freeing and unsettling, as though I'd shed an uncomfortable layer of skin that left me painfully exposed. It was a Thursday evening, nearly a week later, when a knock disrupted the fragile peace I'd finally managed to create for myself. It was firm, insistent, a sound that filled me with immediate dread. I closed my laptop quietly, heart quickening with unease. Naomi wasn't due home for at least another hour, and visitors rarely came unannounced, especially now. I approached the door cautiously, hesitating briefly before peering through the small peephole. My heart lurched painfully when I recognized Charlotte's impeccably styled hair, cascading in perfect golden waves, her husband Mark standing stiffly beside her. Even distorted by the fisheye lens, Charlotte's expression was unmistakably tense, angry even, an unfamiliar look on her perpetually serene face. I debated ignoring the knock, retreating to the safe, quiet confines of my living room. But Charlotte's fist pounded impatiently again, louder this time, forcing me to confront her presence. Gathering courage from a deep breath, I opened the door just enough to face them, standing my ground firmly. "Hannah," Charlotte said coolly, eyes narrowed, her voice clipped and formal. "We need to talk." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice steady, calm. "I'm not sure we do, Charlotte." She brushed past me impatiently, stepping boldly into my apartment without invitation, Mark following awkwardly. His eyes, usually confident and indifferent, avoided mine entirely, a subtle sign of discomfort that made me even more uneasy. Charlotte glanced critically around my apartment, her gaze lingering disdainfully on the understated Dior elegant simplicity she had always misinterpreted as modesty or inadequacy. "What is this about?" I asked sharply, closing the door with deliberate force, feeling protective of the small space I'd worked so hard to claim as mine. She turned abruptly, eyes blazing with barely contained anger. "Mom called me Hannah. She told me everything. How could you abandon our parents like that?" My breath caught sharply at her words, disbelief and anger flooding through me simultaneously. "Abandon? Is that what Mom called it? After all I've done?" "You stopped sending them money, Hannah," Charlotte snapped, voice rising slightly. "You know Dad relies on your support." Her words struck something deep inside me, an old wound reopened abruptly. I took a step forward, meeting her accusing gaze head-on. "And yet, you somehow had enough to take them to Miami. Why couldn't you step in when they needed medication?" Charlotte flinched visibly, momentarily caught off guard before quickly regaining composure. That's different. My marriage and money have nothing to do with this. It's your responsibility. My responsibility? I laughed bitterly, feeling the words scrape raw against my throat. Why? Because I worked myself into the ground while you sat poolside? Charlotte took a sharp breath, eyes glinting dangerously. Don't make this about jealousy, Hannah. You've always envied my life, but punishing Mom and Dad to prove a point? That's low, even for you. Her words felt like acid poured over fresh wounds. But before I could respond, the front door opened abruptly again, and Naomi stepped into the apartment, pausing immediately upon seeing the heated confrontation. Her dark eyes scanned the scene quickly, reading my tension in a heartbeat. What's going on here? Naomi's voice was calm, controlled, but beneath the quiet surface simmered protective strength. She placed her keys deliberately on the side table, stepping slowly toward me, positioning herself subtly between Charlotte and me. Charlotte's eyes narrowed further, clearly irritated by Naomi's arrival. This doesn't concern you, Naomi. It's a family matter. Naomi tilted her head, a gentle but unyielding defiance evident in her stance. Hannah is my family. If you have a problem, you have it with both of us. A heavy silence settled over the room, the air thickening with tension. Charlotte glanced quickly toward Mark, clearly expecting him to intervene, but he remained pointedly silent, eyes glued uncomfortably to the floor. Charlotte exhaled sharply, frustration evident in every rigid line of her body. You think you've won, Hannah? Think carefully. You're going to regret turning your back on your family. Naomi stepped forward, voice firm yet astonishingly calm, cutting through Charlotte's threats effortlessly. No, Charlotte. Hannah's done living her life according to your rules. She's not going to regret finally putting herself first. Charlotte glared fiercely at Naomi before spinning on her heel, pushing past Mark as she headed toward the door. He followed obediently, casting a final apologetic glance back at me before disappearing down the hallway. As the door slammed shut, echoing through the small apartment, Naomi turned softly toward me, her gaze gentle yet unwaveringly protective. I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted from the emotional confrontation, letting Naomi's quiet strength steady me. She took my hand softly, fingers intertwining with mine, a simple gesture that spoke more eloquently than words ever could. I'm proud of you, she whispered, her eyes sincere and warm. You finally stood your ground. My throat tightened, a swell of gratitude and sadness mixing painfully in my chest. I leaned into her, breathing in the familiar comfort of her presence. Naomi's words echoed softly inside me, affirming a truth I desperately needed to embrace. Yet, as I stood there, wrapped in the quiet reassurance of Naomi's arms, an unsettling shadow remained, a vague sense of dread at Charlotte's bitter parting words. I knew Charlotte too well. Her pride, her sense of entitlement, she would not accept this defeat easily. Her threat was more than an empty warning. She would make sure of it. As night enveloped us softly, I allowed myself to sink momentarily into Naomi's gentle embrace, clinging briefly to the fragile illusion of peace. But deep down, I knew with chilling certainty that my battle was far from over. The storm I'd unleashed was just beginning. Weeks slipped quietly past since Charlotte's bitter confrontation at my apartment, yet the echoes of her parting threat lingered uncomfortably in my thoughts, appearing in fleeting, restless dreams. Each morning, I woke from vague nightmares, fragments of Charlotte's angry face dissolving into shadows, Naomi's voice gently pulling me back to reality. But life moved forward, and I immersed myself deeper into work, finding solace and distraction in carefully curated interiors and precise color palettes. Naomi and I gradually rebuilt a fragile peace, fortified by quiet dinners and late-night conversations, restoring a gentle rhythm to my world. Yet, deep down, the quiet dread persisted, a constant reminder that Charlotte's pride would never allow her to let go easily. Then, one stormy afternoon, the peace I'd painstakingly rebuilt shattered abruptly. Naomi returned home early, face pale and eyes wide with unease. Rain clung heavily to her coat, dripping softly onto the apartment floor, each drop resonating ominously in the sudden silence. Hannah, Naomi said softly, her voice tense, controlled. I just got a call from your parents' neighbor. Something's happened. My heart tightened sharply, every nerve instantly alert. What is it? Is Dad all right? She shook her head slowly, moving closer to hold my hands gently. It's not your dad, it's Charlotte. Confusion replaced fear briefly, my voice dropping cautiously. Charlotte? What's happened? Naomi hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Mark kicked her out. Apparently, things have been bad for a while. He caught her cheating with one of his business partners. My breath halted, disbelief rapidly mixing with a strange sadness. Charlotte, who had always projected a flawless, enviable life, was suddenly humanized in the harshest possible way. She moved back in with your parents, Naomi continued softly, squeezing my hand reassuringly. The neighbor says things have been rough. Charlotte's presence has disrupted everything. They're fighting constantly. A sudden pang of sympathy surged through me unexpectedly, immediately replaced by an unsettling guilt. For years, I'd silently wished Charlotte would understand hardship, experience the weight I'd carried alone. Yet now, hearing the bitter reality of her downfall, I felt only emptiness, a hollow victory that offered no real satisfaction. That evening, I sat quietly by the window, watching raindrops stream steadily down the glass, my mind replaying endless childhood moments with Charlotte. We were sisters, rivals, strangers, bound by blood yet separated by countless invisible barriers. Naomi approached quietly, sitting beside me, her gentle presence offering comfort without intrusion. You're not responsible for this, Hannah. Charlotte made her choices. I glanced at Naomi softly, allowing the vulnerability to surface fully for the first time. I know. But why do I still feel guilty? Why does it still hurt? She placed a comforting hand on mine, her touch grounding and reassuring. Because despite everything, you still love your family, even Charlotte. The truth of her words resonated deeply, forcing me to confront emotions I'd long buried. I'd wanted distance, needed space, but the bonds of family were impossible to fully sever, even after betrayal and hurt. The fragile tranquility of that realization was shattered moments later when my phone buzzed insistently on the table, displaying my father's name. I stared blankly at the screen, anxiety clawing sharply at my chest, paralyzing me with indecision. Naomi squeezed my hand softly, silently urging courage. Taking a deep breath, I answered hesitantly. Hello? Hannah. Dad's voice cracked, desperate and strained. Charlotte needs your help. His words reopened old wounds instantly, frustration and exhaustion creeping quickly into my voice. Why me, Dad? Why always me? She has nowhere to go, he pleaded softly, the desperation thickening his voice. We can't handle this. She's angry, confused. Your mother can't deal with the stress anymore. You're her sister. I closed my eyes, forcing back angry tears that threatened to spill. And I wasn't her sister when she showed up at my apartment demanding money? Dad's voice grew weaker, pleading almost inaudibly. Please, Hannah. You're our only hope now. Your only hope, I echoed softly, a wave of sadness overwhelming my anger. How convenient. I hung up, the sudden silence deafening in its weight, yet offering no relief. Naomi looked at me quietly, eyes soft yet firm. Whatever you choose, I'm here. In that quiet moment, clarity settled inside me, powerful yet painful. Charlotte's actions had consequences, but her pain didn't erase the harm she'd caused me. For the first time, I felt empowered to choose myself without guilt, to set boundaries I'd never dared establish before. Days passed without further calls, yet I couldn't shake the persistent heaviness Charlotte's situation left behind. My decision weighed heavily, an unresolved conflict churning within me. But one morning, as I walked alone through the peaceful streets of Brooklyn, sunlight filtering gently through the autumn leaves, a sudden realization struck clearly, illuminating a path I'd never considered before. To fully reclaim my freedom, I needed closure, not through anger or indifference, but by confronting Charlotte directly, clearly, honestly. Only then would I truly be free. That evening, I sat quietly beside Naomi, my voice calm yet resolute. I need to speak with Charlotte, face to face. She looked at me steadily, understanding and respect filling her eyes. Then do it. Not for her, Hannah, for yourself. The weight lifted slightly, relief mixing with determination. I nodded slowly, recognizing this choice not as weakness or surrender, but as genuine courage. Yet deep within, I knew this meeting would be unlike anything before. It was no longer about winning or losing, pride or revenge. It was about confronting the past directly, about healing one painful truth at a time. And as night settled softly around us, I finally understood that the path toward true freedom required facing the shadows of my past head on. Even if the hardest shadow to face was my own reflection. It took days to find the courage to call Charlotte, each attempt ending abruptly with my finger hovering anxiously over her name. I rehearsed potential dialogues endlessly, imagining every possible outcome. Yet the fear of her reaction and my own unresolved anger left me paralyzed in indecision. Finally, on a crisp Saturday morning, I forced myself to dial her number, heart racing painfully as I waited for her voice. She answered after several tense rings, sounding weary and guarded, nothing like the confident Charlotte I once knew. "Hannah?" Her voice held surprise mixed with cautious suspicion. "Charlotte," I replied quietly, voice carefully controlled, betraying none of the nervousness pulsing beneath. "We need to talk, face to face." A hesitant pause filled the silence, long enough for doubt to gnaw at me until she finally answered softly, almost reluctantly. "Okay. Where?" "The coffee shop on 5th, I said calmly. "Tomorrow at 11. "Fine," she murmured before abruptly ending the call. The next morning, anxiety knotted tightly in my chest as I approached the cafe. Autumn sunlight filtered gently through scattered golden leaves, creating patterns of shadow and light on the sidewalk beneath my feet. My hands shook slightly as I entered the cafe, immediately spotting Charlotte at a corner table, face turned away toward the window, her posture stiff and defensive. Taking a slow breath to steady myself, I approached carefully, noticing how different she looked up close. Makeup minimal, hair pulled back carelessly, dark circles shadowing her usually flawless face. For the first time, she appeared vulnerable human. She turned slowly toward me, eyes tired yet defiant, silently assessing me as I sat opposite her. Silence stretched between us painfully until I finally broke it gently. "You look different," she scoffed bitterly, eyes flicking downward. "Life has a funny way of doing that." I nodded slightly, unsure how to proceed. The tension remained palpable, fragile as glass, easily shattered by one wrong word. Eventually, she sighed softly, irritation mixed with genuine curiosity in her tone. "Why did you ask to see me, Hannah? To gloat?" "No," I replied firmly, voice gentle yet strong. "To understand." Charlotte glanced sharply upward, suspicion evident. "Understand what?" "How we got here," I replied carefully, maintaining eye contact steadily. "We were sisters, Charlotte, but now we're barely even strangers." She leaned back slightly, expression softening almost imperceptibly, defensive edges melting briefly. "We made different choices. You chose to prove something, to work hard and suffer silently. I chose a comfortable life. Can you honestly say you're happier than I was?" I met her gaze steadily, contemplating her words deeply before responding honestly. "I wasn't trying to prove something. I was surviving, Charlotte. I did what I thought was right, what was necessary. But the difference was, I never resented your happiness. I resented the fact you used my sacrifices without once acknowledging them." Charlotte flinched, visibly unsettled by the directness of my words. Her voice trembled slightly, anger surfacing to hide vulnerability. "I never asked you to sacrifice yourself, Hannah. Mom and Dad never asked either. You chose to carry those burdens yourself." My voice rose slightly in frustration, emotions raw and exposed. "Did I have a choice, Charlotte? Or did you all conveniently rely on my silence to maintain your comfortable illusions?" She looked away abruptly, eyes glassy, struggling visibly with guilt. Her voice lowered to barely audible whispers. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we did." A momentary silence hung heavily between us, the weight of her quiet admission settling deeply into my chest. Finally, Charlotte glanced back at me cautiously, voice hesitant yet genuine. I've lost everything, Mark. My home, friends. Everything I built is gone. And now I know how it feels to have nothing, to be invisible, Hannah. My heart softened slightly despite myself, recognizing sincerity in her pain. I never wanted you to lose everything, Charlotte. But maybe now you understand why it hurt so much when you all excluded me over and over again. Charlotte's eyes filled suddenly with tears, her voice breaking slightly. I do. I really do, Hannah. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry. The sincerity of her words shook me deeply, unexpected yet deeply healing. I reached slowly across the table, carefully touching her trembling hand. I can't promise to forget everything, Charlotte, but maybe we can both learn from this. Maybe, somehow, we can start over. She looked down quietly at my hand covering hers, hesitant yet hopeful. Do you really believe we can? I smiled softly, feeling the warmth of genuine forgiveness starting to melt years of resentment. I believe we can try. In that quiet cafe, amidst soft murmurs and the comforting scent of freshly ground coffee, a tentative peace settled gently around us. We left together, walking quietly through sunlit streets. Two sisters, wounded but slowly healing, understanding finally dawning between us. Yet as Charlotte disappeared slowly into the distance, I knew our newfound truce was fragile, easily threatened by the unresolved tensions still awaiting us at home. But for now, walking alone yet strangely comforted, I allowed myself cautious hope. The hardest truths had finally been spoken, allowing the painful possibility of real change. 2 weeks passed quietly, a delicate peace settling tentatively between Charlotte and me. Our exchanges were cautious, careful texts that tested the water, small conversations checking in on mundane things like weather or work. Each interaction felt like carefully stepping across thin ice, wary of cracks beneath the surface, yet determined to move forward. On a late Friday evening, as Naomi and I were preparing dinner, laughter gently filling the small kitchen, my phone buzzed loudly on the countertop. Glancing at the unfamiliar number displayed, a shiver of apprehension tightened my chest. Hello? I answered hesitantly. Hannah? Charlotte's voice shook slightly, breathless, panicked. Instantly, fear replaced my cautious optimism. Charlotte, what's wrong? Her voice trembled audibly. It's Dad. He collapsed. Mom called an ambulance. They're at Mount Sinai now. You need to come. My fingers gripped the phone tightly, heart pounding violently. Naomi moved swiftly beside me, eyes wide with immediate concern. Is he? I don't know, Charlotte whispered, voice strained and desperate. Just hurry, please. Within moments, Naomi and I were speeding toward the hospital, anxiety heavy in every silent glance exchanged between us. By the time we arrived, my legs felt numb beneath me, every nerve raw, bracing for the worst. Charlotte sat alone in the sterile waiting room, body rigid and pale, lost in tense silence. Our eyes met briefly, fear, anger, and uncertainty briefly mingling. She stood quickly, visibly shaken, uncharacteristically vulnerable. Without hesitation, I stepped toward her, gently pulling her into a tentative embrace. For once, neither pride nor resentment kept us apart, only shared dread. What happened? I asked softly, guiding her back to the chairs. Naomi gave us space, standing quietly nearby, supportive but respectful of our private pain. Charlotte's voice trembled as she recounted the chaos. He just collapsed. Mom panicked, didn't know what to do. I've never seen her so frightened. They took him straight into surgery. A nurse approached moments later, speaking quietly but firmly, updating us in precise clinical terms. My father had suffered another stroke, more severe this time. His condition was critical, the next hours decisive. Hearing the stark truth of his fragility felt surreal, a harsh reminder of how quickly life could shift beneath our feet. Hours stretched agonizingly, time distorted by anxious waiting. Charlotte remained silent, withdrawn, fear tightening her expression. Naomi periodically squeezed my hand reassuringly, grounding me with her quiet strength. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Charlotte briefly, her eyes closed, head resting awkwardly against the sterile wall. Watching her sleep, vulnerability etched deeply into her face, I realized clearly for the first time. Beneath Charlotte's privileged exterior had always existed fear of failure, of rejection, of losing control. I understood suddenly how alike we were beneath our differences. Two sisters, shaped differently by identical fears. When Charlotte stirred awake moments later, our eyes met silently, mutual understanding passing quietly between us. Before words could be spoken, footsteps echoed sharply down the hall. Our mother approached slowly, face pale, eyes swollen from crying. The strength I'd always associated with her now utterly absent.
"Hannah, Charlotte,"
She whispered weakly, voice filled with regret.
"he's awake. He's asking for you."
Charlotte stood instantly, visibly frightened, hesitant. I took her hand instinctively, silently offering courage. As we entered our father's hospital room, the sterile smell and beeping monitors amplified my anxiety, each step forward feeling impossibly heavy. Dad lay quietly, fragile beneath the white hospital blankets, eyes half closed, breath shallow. Seeing him vulnerable shocked me deeply. The strong man from my childhood memories had vanished, replaced by this weakened figure struggling to hold on to life. He saw us approach slowly, a faint, tired smile barely visible. "My girls," he whispered softly, voice thin, barely audible. We sat silently beside him, Charlotte's hand gripping mine tightly. Our mother's presence, quiet and uncertain, hovered in the background, anxious eyes flickering between us. Dad spoke softly, each word an effort. "I've made mistakes, many mistakes. I never wanted you two to drift apart. I'm sorry, Hannah, for everything." Tears stung my eyes, grief mingling painfully with unexpected relief. His simple apology held immense weight, a validation I'd longed desperately for, yet never anticipated receiving. Charlotte trembled silently beside me, equally overwhelmed, tears streaming quietly down her face. "I need you both to promise something," he continued weakly. "No matter what happens to me, promise me you'll take care of each other." My chest tightened painfully. I glanced sideways at Charlotte, finding her eyes searching mine deeply, fearful, hopeful. Without hesitation, I nodded gently, squeezing Charlotte's hand reassuringly. "We promise." Charlotte's voice trembled slightly, fragile but sincere. "We'll try." Dad smiled weakly, relief evident despite his visible pain. "That's all I ask." In that quiet hospital room, amidst harsh fluorescent lighting and medical equipment, something fundamental shifted between Charlotte and me. Recognition, understanding, reconciliation. We had been rivals, strangers, yet beneath everything remained sisters, bound inevitably by love, pain, and loss. As we stepped quietly into the corridor, Naomi greeted me gently, her comforting presence instantly steadying me. Charlotte hesitated briefly before softly touching my arm, voice earnest, yet uncertain. "I meant it, Hannah. I'll try. Truly." Meeting her gaze firmly, I responded honestly. "I believe you." Our mother watched silently from a distance, eyes filled with quiet regret, but remained unable or unwilling to join this tentative peace we'd begun. Yet somehow, that no longer felt as important. This fragile truce belonged solely to Charlotte and me, a beginning, not an ending. We stood quietly, bound together in silent, shared grief, understanding that this turning point would either heal us or break us entirely. Yet, whatever challenges lay ahead, one truth remained unshakable. For the first time, we faced them together. And perhaps, despite everything, that was enough. In the tense weeks following Dad's hospitalization, Charlotte and I formed an uneasy alliance, bound by our shared promise at his bedside. Each day, we navigated the strange, delicate landscape of family recovery, visiting Dad regularly, monitoring his fragile improvement, and managing our strained, careful interactions with Mom, whose silent resentment lingered like a shadow. It wasn't long before subtle signs of her discomfort became obvious. Conversations ended abruptly whenever I entered the room. Subtle shifts in her eyes revealed simmering tension, resentment silently emanating beneath practiced politeness. Charlotte noticed too, often glancing nervously toward me, sensing the rising storm we'd both expected but hoped to avoid. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the fragile truce we'd carefully built finally cracked under pressure. Charlotte and I sat silently in the kitchen at our parents' house, sipping coffee cautiously, tension evident yet manageable, until Mom entered abruptly, eyes fixed sharply on me. "Hannah," she said coldly, voice tightly controlled yet brimming with accusation. "We need to talk. Alone." Charlotte glanced anxiously between us, silently asking if I needed support. I nodded subtly, reassuring her. "It's okay." She left reluctantly, footsteps fading into uneasy silence as Mom closed the kitchen door, isolating us completely. My stomach tightened with apprehension, heart rate quickening instinctively. "What is it, Mom?" I asked softly, voice calm despite the anxiety building inside. She stood rigidly, eyes narrowed. "I thought we raised you better than this. You manipulated Charlotte, didn't you? Turning her against us?" I stared in disbelief, hurt briefly stealing my words. "Manipulated? I never—" "Don't pretend innocence," she snapped harshly, cutting me off. "You've always resented Charlotte. Jealous of her life, her marriage. Now you've turned her against her family when we're most vulnerable." Frustration surged within me, sharp words bubbling dangerously close. Yet, taking a deep breath, I steadied myself, choosing honesty over anger. Charlotte changed because life changed her. If anyone manipulated Charlotte, it was you, building her up while ignoring everything I did. Her eyes blazed angrily. "You chose your life, Hannah. You insisted on independence, hard work, sacrifice. We never asked that of you." "Then why did you never refuse the money I sent?" My voice shook slightly, heavy with long-held pain finally unleashed. "Why did you accept my sacrifice, yet never acknowledge it?" Silence stretched painfully between us, my question hanging unanswered, until finally, she spoke softly, voice suddenly stripped of its harshness. "Because it was easier. Easier to pretend everything was fine. Easier to overlook the hurt we caused than admit it." I stared at her, anger dissolving slowly into confusion, sadness. "Why, Mom? Why was pretending easier than simply being honest?" Her voice lowered, barely audible. "Because facing the truth meant admitting we failed. Failed you, failed Charlotte, failed as parents. Ignoring your sacrifices made them feel less real, less painful." The honesty stunned me. Vulnerability I'd never witnessed before cracking through her carefully maintained facade. Suddenly, I saw clearly the frightened woman beneath her anger, terrified of losing control, terrified of admitting weakness. "Mom," I whispered gently, moving closer. "Acknowledging your mistakes wouldn't have weakened us. It could have healed us." Her eyes filled slowly with tears, defiance dissolving into silent regret. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's too late." "It's never too late," I replied softly, cautiously offering comfort. Yet, despite my sincerity, her expression hardened abruptly, fear overcoming vulnerability once more. "No, Hannah, for us it is. Too much damage, too much resentment." Her voice turned cold again, protective walls rising rapidly. "We can't fix this. Not now." My heart sank painfully, realizing our reconciliation might remain forever incomplete. The fragile hope I'd felt moments earlier cracked beneath her fear-driven rejection. But before I could speak again, Charlotte re-entered quietly, eyes filled with worry, glancing rapidly between us. "Everything okay?" she asked cautiously. Mom looked away, voice firm and final. "Your sister was just leaving." Charlotte glanced quickly toward me, confused and concerned. I nodded gently, signaling my acceptance. "It's okay, Charlotte. I'll talk to you later." Walking silently to my car moments later, the raw ache of disappointment heavy within me, I realized the painful truth clearly. Reconciliation required willingness from both sides. No matter how much I desired healing, I couldn't force my mother to confront the fears she'd spent a lifetime denying. Returning home, Naomi embraced me gently, sensing immediately the emotional weight I carried. "What happened?" she asked softly, her voice comforting. "I tried," I whispered softly, tears finally spilling silently. "I really tried, but she won't let me in." Naomi held me quietly, strength and understanding radiating from her embrace. Then let her go for now. You've done everything you could. As night deepened around us, a strange clarity emerged, slowly acceptance. Accepting my mother's limits, accepting my own boundaries, finally releasing the guilt I'd carried silently for years. Charlotte had chosen reconciliation. My mother had not. And somehow, that reality offered painful yet genuine freedom. The path toward true healing had never been clearer. It wasn't dependent on others' acceptance or acknowledgement. Healing required only courage to forgive, to set boundaries, and finally, to move forward without guilt. Yet, deep within me, a quiet sorrow lingered, knowing my mother might forever remain beyond my reach. But for now, accepting that truth felt profoundly liberating, bittersweet, yet powerfully real. In letting go of the impossible, I had finally claimed my freedom. The weeks following my confrontation with Mom felt surreal, a strange liminal period marked by fragile peace and quiet sorrow. Naomi stood steadfastly by my side, guiding me gently through emotional waves that rose and fell unpredictably, always reminding me of the strength I'd finally claimed for myself. Charlotte maintained frequent contact, her messages sincere yet hesitant, clearly aware of the fragile ground we stood on. Despite our mother's stubborn distance, Charlotte and I forged slowly ahead, carefully rebuilding our relationship one cautious conversation at a time. But beneath my cautious optimism lingered a quiet dread, an intuition whispering that my journey toward healing was far from complete. And soon enough, reality confirmed my fears. It was late evening when Charlotte's frantic call disrupted the calm Naomi and I shared. Her voice trembled uncontrollably, panic unmistakable. "Hannah, it's Dad. He's had another stroke. It's bad this time. Really bad." My heart lurched painfully, dread flooding every nerve. Without hesitation, Naomi drove me quickly toward the hospital, silence heavy yet comforting between us. Upon arriving, the clinical white hallways felt hauntingly familiar yet unbearably foreign, reflecting my deepest anxieties sharply back at me. Outside Dad's room, Charlotte waited anxiously, eyes red, face pale, fear radiating visibly. Without words, I embraced her tightly, our shared dread forming a powerful bond between us.
He's stable now.
Charlotte whispered shakily, voice brittle. "But the doctors say he's deteriorating. He wants to see you. Alone." Fear knotted tightly in my stomach. Alone meant vulnerability mine and his. Yet, despite dread, I nodded silently, stepping carefully into his dimly lit hospital room, closing the door softly behind me. Dad lay quietly, monitors blinking rhythmically, pale skin illuminated gently by dim overhead lights. His eyes opened slowly, sadness evident in their depths, and he reached weakly toward me. I moved gently to his bedside, taking his frail hand, feeling its tremble against my palm.
Dad,
I whispered softly, throat tightening with emotion.
"Hannah,"
His voice cracked weakly, eyes glistening. "I haven't much time. There are things I need to say." I squeezed his hand reassuringly. "I'm here. Just speak." His eyes softened painfully, regret shadowing his features deeply. "I'm sorry, Hannah, for failing you, for not seeing how much we hurt you. You deserved better." His words cut deeply, unexpectedly releasing years of hidden grief. Tears stung sharply, slipping silently down my cheeks. "It's okay, Dad," I whispered, voice breaking gently. "I understand." "No," he whispered urgently, voice trembling, desperate. "You don't yet. I've carried secrets. Secrets that tore us apart." Confusion flooded through me, dread mixing swiftly with curiosity. "What secrets, Dad?" He struggled visibly with words, pain etched deeply into every line of his face. "Charlotte's husband, Mark. He offered money, lots of it. Your mother accepted it. That's why they favored Charlotte. It wasn't just favoritism. It was payment, Hannah. Payment to keep their approval, to maintain a certain lifestyle." Shock surged through me, disbelief and hurt crashing violently together. Sold their affection? Their loyalty? He nodded weakly, shame filling his eyes. It started small, then grew. Soon, it became normal. Charlotte never knew she was their pawn, too. But you paid the price, Hannah. I never stopped it. I was too weak. My heart shattered painfully, betrayal cutting deeper than I'd imagined possible. Yet beneath the anguish emerged clarity finally. Painfully, I understood fully the roots of my lifelong pain.
Dad,
I whispered softly, tears streaming steadily.
why now?
Because I can't leave you without truth, without a chance to heal, he whispered urgently, voice fading slowly. Don't let our mistakes define you, Hannah. You deserve freedom, real freedom. His words echoed profoundly, embedding themselves deeply into my soul. My father had offered the hardest truth, a devastating gift, yet profoundly necessary. Promise me, he whispered faintly, strength fading visibly. Promise you'll forgive not for us, for you. I nodded softly, tears falling silently, feeling the immense weight of his request. I promise, Dad. I'll try. He smiled weakly, relief evident despite his growing weakness. His eyes closed slowly, breathing softening into restless sleep. I exited quietly, shaken profoundly, finding Charlotte anxiously waiting. She sensed my turmoil immediately, concern flickering intensely across her face. What did he say, Hannah? I hesitated briefly, then spoke softly but honestly. He revealed the truth, Charlotte. Our parents accepted money from Mark. That's why they treated us so differently. They chose their comfort over us, over truth. Charlotte staggered slightly, disbelief rapidly replaced by hurt, anger, devastation. They used us? Manipulated us? I nodded slowly, pain reflected between us clearly. But Dad asked something important. He asked for forgiveness. Charlotte's eyes filled slowly with tears, her voice breaking painfully. How can we forgive this, Hannah? How can we ever heal? Taking her hands gently, I spoke softly yet firmly. Because forgiveness isn't about excusing them, Charlotte. It's about choosing peace for ourselves, choosing freedom from the chains they've bound us in. Charlotte nodded slowly, understanding dawning clearly. Can we do that? I smiled gently, reassuringly. We have to. Otherwise, we'll never be free. Charlotte embraced me suddenly, tightly, two sisters clinging desperately to hope, courage, healing. As we stood silently together, painful truths finally aired. I knew we'd crossed the final threshold toward true reconciliation, painful yet profoundly liberating. Leaving the hospital later, Naomi silently took my hand, sensing deeply the weight I carried. Yet beneath pain and betrayal simmered newfound strength. Finally, I saw clearly the path toward healing, forgiveness, and true liberation. Dad had given me the hardest yet most precious gift, truth. It was my choice now to embrace it, to finally reclaim myself fully. Yet, even as hope emerged brightly, dread lingered quietly in shadows, knowing that embracing true forgiveness meant confronting one final daunting obstacle, our mother. But this time, facing that final challenge, I knew exactly who I was, stronger, wiser, finally free. And nothing, no matter how painful, could ever take that from me again. The evening sunlight painted the horizon in gentle shades of amber and gold as I stood silently outside my parents' house, the weight of my father's confession still heavy in my heart. Charlotte lingered beside me, silent and uncertain, her presence a quiet reassurance of our fragile but growing unity. I glanced briefly toward her, seeing clearly the anxiety mirrored in her eyes. Are you ready for this? I asked softly, voice gentle yet firm. Charlotte hesitated, then nodded slowly, determination surfacing through her uncertainty. We have to do this, Hannah, for ourselves. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, knocking decisively on the familiar front door. The sound echoed through the still evening air, resonating sharply within my chest. The door opened slowly, revealing our mother's tense, guarded face. She studied us cautiously, immediately sensing our resolve. What is this? Mom, I began calmly, voice controlled yet strong. We need to talk. No more hiding. No more lies. Her eyes narrowed defensively. There's nothing left to discuss. I stepped forward firmly, Charlotte beside me, a united front. You know that's not true. Dad told me everything. Mark's money, your choices, the lies that broke us apart. Mom's face drained of color instantly, fear briefly flickering behind her cold fad. She stepped backward, her voice shaking slightly. He shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have? Charlotte interjected sharply, voice trembling yet strong. Or shouldn't have needed to. Why did you let money matter more than your daughters? Our mother sank slowly onto the living room sofa, anger melting swiftly into silent shame. Her voice was quiet, fragile. It was easier to pretend, Charlotte. Easier than facing how badly we'd failed you. Charlotte's voice softened slightly, sorrow mingling deeply with her words. But you didn't just fail us. You used us. You let Hannah sacrifice everything without acknowledgement. You allowed me to become a puppet in Mark's games. Mom looked away silently, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. It spiraled out of control. Soon, lies became easier than truth. Your father tried to stop me, but I wouldn't listen. I was too afraid of losing everything. Yet you lost us, I said softly, voice gentle yet firm. Was it worth it, Mom? She finally lifted her eyes, regret etched deeply in her expression. Nothing was worth losing you both. Silence stretched painfully, the quiet admission hanging heavily between us. Finally, I stepped forward, voice gentle yet resolute. We can't undo the past, but we can face it, honestly, courageously. Mom hesitated, then slowly nodded. What can I possibly do now? Let us heal, I replied softly. Let Charlotte and me rebuild what you tore apart. And maybe one day you can be part of it again. She looked away painfully, voice trembling slightly. I don't deserve that. Charlotte stepped forward gently, sincerity shining through her voice. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something we're choosing. But you must respect our boundaries. We're no longer your tools or your sacrifices. Mom nodded softly, defeated yet understanding. I accept that. I'm so sorry for everything. In that moment, something profound shifted, an invisible weight lifting gently. We hadn't erased the pain, nor excused the harm, but we'd claimed our right to heal, establishing boundaries built on truth, courage, and honesty. Charlotte and I walked slowly from the house, feeling lighter, freer, though deeply changed. As we stood quietly under fading twilight, Charlotte turned toward me softly. Do you think she'll change? I considered carefully, then answered honestly. I don't know. But that's not our responsibility anymore. Our responsibility is to ourselves and each other. She smiled faintly, squeezing my hand reassuringly. Then let's start living like it. Returning home, Naomi greeted me warmly, her embrace comforting, strong, unwavering. As night settled gently around us, clarity settled deeply within me. Healing wasn't about erasing past wounds, it was about accepting truths, setting clear boundaries, and consciously choosing freedom. For the first time, the path ahead felt genuinely hopeful, not because the past was forgotten, but because the future now belonged entirely to me. Phase 3.2. The Journey of Rebirth. Months passed quietly, marked by steady, purposeful healing. Charlotte and I grew closer, building our bond on honest, open communication, free from past burdens. Naomi remained steadfastly by my side, celebrating every small victory, guiding me gently toward emotional renewal. My father recovered slowly, his health improving gradually, though the profound impact of his illness lingered. His vulnerability created space for newfound honesty, strengthening bonds previously strained by silence and fear. Mom kept her distance respectfully, understanding boundaries we'd clearly established. Our relationship remained fragile, yet slowly improved through careful, honest communication. Forgiveness emerged slowly, not through forgetting, but through choosing emotional liberation. One quiet afternoon, as I walked alone through Brooklyn's sunlit streets, gentle warmth washed over me, quiet joy mingling deeply with gratitude. My journey hadn't been easy, marked by betrayal, heartache, and struggle. Yet every painful truth had guided me here, toward genuine freedom. Returning home that evening, Naomi awaited me gently, eyes filled warmly with quiet pride. "You look different," she said softly, embracing me tenderly. I smiled genuinely, voice quiet yet strong. "I feel different, free, finally." In her embrace, deep comfort mingled profoundly with newfound clarity. I had reclaimed my life, my voice, myself entirely. Forgiveness hadn't erased the past, but had freed me to embrace the present fully. As evening settled gently around us, I finally understood fully the profound truth beneath my journey. Healing required courage, to face truth boldly, set firm boundaries, and reclaim personal freedom. I had faced my greatest fears, confronted painful truths, chosen forgiveness, not for others, but purely for myself. Now, finally, I stood unburdened, stronger, wiser, reborn, and this time, nothing would ever hold me back again. 3 years later. The gentle afternoon sunlight filtered softly through large windows, casting warm patterns onto the oak floors of my new design studio. I stood quietly, savoring the quiet beauty of the moment. Each carefully chosen piece in the studio represented a part of me, my taste, my experiences, my journey. For the first time in years, my life felt entirely mine, shaped not by obligation or guilt, but by deliberate, mindful choice. The bell above the entrance chimed lightly, pulling my attention toward the door. Charlotte stepped inside, her eyes immediately lighting up with familiar warmth. Our bond had grown slowly over these past few years, strengthened by honesty, patience, and genuine care. We had rebuilt carefully, consciously, no longer defined by our past, but enriched by it. "You've really done something special here," Charlotte said softly, glancing around appreciatively. Her voice carried sincerity, a far cry from the guarded resentment that once defined us. I smiled warmly, stepping toward her. "Thanks. It finally feels right." Charlotte hesitated slightly, then spoke quietly, eyes vulnerable yet hopeful. "Hannah, I wanted to thank you for everything, for forgiveness, for letting us start again." Gently, I reached for her hand, sincerity clear in my voice. "We both chose to start over, Charlotte. Forgiveness wasn't just about healing you or Mom, it was about freeing myself too." She nodded softly, understanding resonating deeply between us. "Mom's trying. She asks about you. She wants to reconnect when you're ready." I smiled thoughtfully, feeling calm certainty in my choice. "I know, and one day soon, I'll be ready." The studio door chimed again gently, and Naomi entered quietly, eyes sparkling warmly, a bouquet of fresh lilacs in her hands. My heart swelled warmly, happiness instantly radiating through me. Charlotte glanced warmly between us, understanding clearly evident. "I'll leave you two to celebrate." As Charlotte left quietly, Naomi approached softly, handing me the lilacs, a quiet reminder of our first days together, our history woven subtly into every gentle gesture. "Congratulations, Hannah," Naomi whispered warmly, pride and love clear in her voice. I smiled deeply, accepting her embrace gratefully, comforted by her familiar strength. "I couldn't have done it without you." She shook her head gently, her voice warm and firm. "You did this, Hannah. Your strength, your courage, this was all you." I breathed deeply, savoring quiet pride, joy, and gratitude. Naomi had guided me gently, yes, but I'd claimed my freedom myself, confronting fears, establishing boundaries, choosing healing deliberately. That evening, we walked quietly through Brooklyn's streets, hands gently intertwined, comfortable silence surrounding us warmly. My journey had begun painfully, defined by sacrifice, resentment, and betrayal. Yet every difficult step had guided me here to clarity, forgiveness, and genuine emotional liberation. Later that night, alone in quiet reflection, I wrote gently in my journal the final words I'd carried silently within myself for so long. "Healing isn't linear, nor easy. It's facing truths bravely, even when they shatter your reality. It's choosing yourself deliberately, courageously, without guilt. Forgiveness isn't a gift for others, it's reclaiming freedom for yourself. Closing the journal softly, I breathed deeply, peace gently surrounding me. My past no longer defined my future. I did. As night settled softly around me, quiet gratitude filled my heart profoundly. For every painful truth faced, every boundary firmly set, every step toward liberation I'd courageously taken. I'd become more than a survivor. I'd become free. And this time, my freedom belonged entirely, unshakably, to me. Forever.